Hi there and welcome back. My name is Christine and I am going to talk about my second and third trips to Tanzania. Back in 2007, I made a promise to a congregation of parishioners at a Catholic church that I would help them build a church after they were celebrating Mass in a rundown schoolroom. In May of 2008, I had the opportunity of going back to Tanzania. Between the first time I went and the second time I went, I had started the process of opening a nonprofit organization. I filed everything with the Attorney General in Massachusetts, and we were officially incorporated, and all our paperwork went to the federal government, to the IRS, to get our exemption. I was working at Goldman Sachs at the time, and I had, limited time off. I had like 9 weeks vacation, but I was going to take 3 weeks in May and go to Tanzania with my daughter, who had to do a service trip. And since her mother was building a church in Tanzania, what better way to serve? So off to Tanzania we went, lots of luggage filled with clothes, children's clothes, and pastoral garments, vestments, and such for the priest at the church. I had sent them money throughout the year to continue building the church, and the parishioners too had contributed money to help work on the church as well. So it wasn't me alone. We did have support of the community, which was great. We stayed with the missionary sisters of Our Lady of Africa. We lived in the convent. Throughout the day we would spend time either at the church helping assist with building, sifting sand, going shopping, buying whatever supplies needed to continue the building of the church. On other days, we would spend time with the priest and go to people's homes and visit orphanages and various different schools. We even spent time with some animals that were sick, caring for them. So it was an interesting trip. I wouldn't say that our service was impactful, but we did get to see the church that I had spent so much money and time raising money to see the progress of it. It was a big difference from a year earlier when I left with just a pile of cinder blocks. So in 2008, we spent 3 weeks there, and we left with the promise that we would come back and we would continue raising money to support the project. So it was an interesting year. I was working, like I said, at Goldman Sachs, and so in 2009, a lot of churches were closing in the Boston area. So I started working with the Archdiocese of Boston and various pastors to ask if we can get some of their church items that were left behind. A lot of the buildings were being sold, they were being turned into condominiums or being knocked down completely, and they had pews and altars and tabernacles and all sorts of things that I thought would be great to go over to Tanzania. I had also met this guy named Jack Hurley. He had a shop called Custom Stained Glass, and I asked him if he would make a stained glass window. I was really surprised. I just knocked on his door and went in, and he said he would do it. I learned that the name of the church was St. Jude's, and Jack did some research. And I guess I didn't know this, and maybe you did too, but every stained glass window in a church tells a story. This was news to me. I mean, I've grown up Catholic my whole life, and I never had an idea about the stained glass windows in the church. So once Jack found out that the name of the church was going to be St. Jude's, Jack did some research on St. Jude, and the window depicted the story of St. Jude. Did this window, it was a beautiful window. The colors were vivid, and he put it in 4 pieces. It was the shape of a cross, and we got the dimensions and everything from Tanzania, so it was quite the thing. Once the window was done, and we secured all these pews and altars and tabernacles and baptismal fonts and all sorts of things. I mean, you name it, we had it. And found out that the cost of shipping everything was going to cost $6,200. So we did a fundraiser. I did it at work. We sold plaques, little brass plaques that were put on pews. And this enabled us to pay for the shipping. So each plaque was $150. We had 50 pews going over, and this was a way to raise money for the shipping. So in October of 2008, we loaded the shipping container. We had a bunch of volunteers. Some other people came with volunteers of items to put in the container to send to Tanzania. And we worked hard, and we cracked a bottle of champagne when we closed the doors, and the truck went and took the container, and off to Tanzania it went. And I had the opportunity to follow it through its 3-month journey off to Tanzania. So it was kind of interesting. It stopped at quite a few ports and switched ships, but it made it to Tanzania in January. However, the church didn't get the container until mid-February. Yeah, mid-February they received the container, and it was held up in customs for quite a while. I'm going to say 4 weeks, and I learned so much about the customs process through stories of parishioners and the pastor in Tanzania. So it got held up, even though the church is an exempt organization, or should I say was an exempt organization in Tanzania. They didn't have to pay the 25% duty or the 18% VAT. Or at least they told me they didn't have to. But they had to pay a storage fee, which was quite expensive. And then they had to ship the container from Dar es Salaam to a small village in Arusha. So it made the journey, and the total cost of all of those things ended up being another $6,000. I was really surprised that it was going to cost that much. I had no idea. You know, they had to hire a customs agent and a shipping company and pay Swiss port fees and all sorts of things. I have since become quite accustomed to what goes on in Tanzania regarding importation of anything. It's quite expensive. So that's something that I will talk about another day. But it was fascinating. I would get pictures from Father Honoratus of everything being unloaded. And I guess what surprised them, they paid all this money to have the container arrive, only to be told they had 4 hours to unload it, and then the container had to go back to the port. I guess they were under the assumption that they would get to keep the container. Oh well. So they had a whole bunch of parishioners and volunteers and kids come help unload the container and put everything into a storage unit on another site. So luckily we had the ability to store everything. Just a few weeks later, I lost my job at Goldman Sachs. I knew that I wanted to pursue this work in Tanzania. I felt a calling for it. So I booked a ticket, and at the end of March, I flew to Tanzania. I was going to go and do whatever work was necessary to help finish the church before opening Mass on Easter Sunday 2009, which was April 12th. So we worked really, really hard, and I was given a driver and a parishioner's car, and I had the ability to go shopping every day. I went with a pocket full of money, and it was going to be my responsibility to purchase all the necessary finishing touches. There's something to give money. It's quite rewarding to not only have the money donated, but to go and spend it exactly where it's supposed to go. I'm not quite sure that's the way nonprofits should do things now that I've been doing this for 10 years, but it was really, really an exciting time. So I had this driver, and we would go shopping every day. We'd go buy glass, we'd buy cement, we'd buy tools and screwdrivers and drills and gasoline for a generator, and I was working with some of the women to plan a big feast for the opening day. It was really, really a spectacular, heartwarming time for me. It was a very personal experience, and not everyone goes to a foreign country and has that kind of experience. The parishioners were awesome. They welcomed me to their homes. They welcomed me to their offices. They welcomed me into their hearts. It was really a special time. At the opening Mass, the bishop was there, and it was all in Swahili, but I also taught the choir how to sing Christopher Tin's Baba Yetu. They never heard it before, so they all learned the words and the music, and they sang it for the first time on opening Mass on Easter Sunday, and it was quite special, at least for me. My mom came. Jack, the guy who made the stained glass window, he showed up in Tanzania. They went on safari for a few days. I stayed back to kind of just take it all in and do a couple of day trips. And while I was there, I visited some schools and some orphanages and did some other things that are off the beaten track, which was really, really eye-opening. The one good thing about building the church was after the opening mass, my job there was pretty much finished, right? The parishioners took really good care of it. You know, they clean it every week. They would decorate it. They would really, really go out of their way to appreciate their new house of worship. And I was grateful for having the opportunity to do that then. I don't know if I would do that today, but back then, it was just awesome. Anyway, that's how my first 3 trips to Tanzania. One was the first time where I made the promise that I talked about in my first video. The second time I went with my daughter. And the third time I went for the opening mass after we had shipped all of the artifacts to the church. After that, I was pretty much set on Tanzania. It was an exciting destination, and it was a place I knew that I felt like I could help. And I had the energy, I had the perseverance, and I had the desire to really help and make a difference. I had the desire to make a difference. I promised some people that I would be back. Not to finish working on the church, but to start a new project, and start a project that I can call my own. Something that was my idea and something that was needed. That story begins on my next video.